After finishing The Witcher 3, I was amazed by what CD Projekt has achieved. I just didn't know that an open world RPG could be this good, and it made it into my top 10 favorite video games of all time. Time passes and I found out that CD Projekt is making a new game. I was beyond hyped, not because they were just making a new game, but they were making a Cyberpunk game. If you didn't know, Cyberpunk is my favorite setting in all of fiction, and I fell in love with this setting after watching the movie Ghost in the Shell. I was beyond hyped, and I even pre-ordered the game for the PS4, which was a mistake. Unfortunately, Cyberpunk 2077 has failed to meet a lot of people's expectations, including mine. Cyberpunk 2077 was a tough pill to swallow, because I thought the game would have a deep and flexible RPG narrative system. I was expecting a lot of variety in terms of role-playing, and decisions that could change the narrative in a drastic manner. But what we got was an action-adventure open-world game, with light to medium RPG mechanics. The 3 life paths didn't have much of an impact on the narrative, and most of the time they served as flavored text instead. The game has been dragged down by other things, such as performance issues, glitches, shallow progression system, and lack of police system. Fortunately, the game has been improved a lot since the release date. However, I still think that there is a lot of room for improvement in the sequel. Cyberpunk 2077 might have been a disappointment for me. However, I would like to keep covering things that the game did well. The combat of Cyberpunk 2077 is what I will keep in the sequel because of how visceral it is and how much depth it has. The build variety adds a lot of freedom in terms of how you want to play. You can go through combat situation by shooting your enemies or cut your enemies in half. Other methods can be used such as hacking and hand-to-hand combat. I would definitely keep the traversability of Cyberpunk 2077 in the sequel, simply because it feels very immersive whenever you climb a building in Night City, and I would want them to expand more on the traversal mechanics of Cyberpunk 2077. I also still want the sequel to be in first person simply because it works great with the combat, and it makes walking around the city very immersive since you can see the small details in the aesthetic of Cyberpunk 2077. I would like to have a bunch of third-person cutscenes in major plot points because one of the problems of Cyberpunk 2077 was it had a great variety when it came down to character customization, but because the whole game was in first person, even in the cutscenes, it made the character customization seem very pointless. Night City is a fun area to walk around. However, outside Night City, the rest of the areas in the game are very underwhelming, simply because the point of interest is very far away from the player. Pacifica looks very dull, and it doesn't retain the same aesthetic as Night City, unfortunately. And yes, I know there's a narrative reason for that, but I would have sacrificed that part of the narrative to get a more interesting area. Besides Pacifica, there's the outskirts. Unfortunately, the outskirts is just another big open area where there's barely any NPCs to interact with or any neon buildings to see. All you get is a couple of petrol stations and some power plants. The way I would change the level design of Cyberpunk 2077 is by developing a multi-level city, just like the ones in China. There will be an underground area, aka the sewers, where poor people live and where the black market exists. The ground level of Night City is where the middle class people would live and where most of the mafia and the gangs will reside. And finally, you have the upper level where rich people, celebrities and politicians occupy. I would want the upper level to have an aesthetic change as well. They can make it more nature friendly to symbolize the privileges of its residents. Side note, a loading screen for every level would help designing this concept a lot easier. The narrative RPG elements felt very restrictive and meaningless because of a plot device that took the player's freedom to roleplay. And yes, I'm talking about V's brain cancer, where he has only 2 weeks to live according to the plot. The plot in the sequel should be very flexible, and I think I have an idea on how to set it up. The goal of the sequel will be to reach 100 million eddies after a year. The game will have 2 different life paths, which are corporate path and street kid path. Both paths will share the same goal. Now you might wonder what these 2 paths look like, and I have the answer to that question. The corporate path will have you taken over your parents' company, aka Militech, and your job is to make the business very successful by achieving this 100 million eddy goal. Now you could be a corrupt CEO by dealing with the black market or by killing your competitors through your own hand and through mafia/gang alliance. Another option is being a very honorable CEO by taking side quests which involves you having to help one of your kidnapped employees, or by dealing with betrayal from one of your close colleagues. stories. The possibilities of different storylines is almost endless, and the 100 million eddies plot device provides this flexibility that Cyberpunk 2077 didn't have, in my opinion. The same thing that I mentioned in the corporate path can be applied to the street kid path, where you could roleplay as the Sopranos and you could go about it in any way you want, depending on your personality. If you want to be an asshole, go for it. If you want to be honorable and respected, go for it. You can even get an ending if you don't reach this 100 million eddies goal. Another thing I want to mention, the path choice you will make will determine where you will start in the open world. So if you opt in for a street kid path, then you will start in the underground level. However, if you opt in for the corporate path, then you will start in the upper level of Night City. Also, random encounters in Night City would make exploration very rewarding, and it will make side quests feel very dynamic, because frankly, I didn't like the message/call system in Cyberpunk 2077 because it made the world feel very static, in my opinion. Anyways, this is it for this video, and I do hope CD Projekt gives us a much improved Cyberpunk game. I will like you to comment on your ideas for the sequel, and yeah, I hope you have a great day and see you next time.